give folks a few seconds to filter in, because in a webinar, virtual event space, everyone sort of clicks the minute it goes live. So lots of people are flooding in right now. We'll just give them a few seconds to filter in. My name is Carlos Burgos. I'm the special assistant to the president here at Gutman Community College. Super excited to be working with this new president, Larry Johnson, which you'll hear from if you haven't heard from the first few iterations of this series. We've got a lot of great things planned for the college, so I'm excited to be in this role. I've been at Gutman for quite some time, so it's nice to sort of be in this position. So the way this will work is we are on Zoom webinar for the first time, so that's a new thing. So that means that if you have questions, please use the Q&A feature. It helps us just sort of keep things logistically centered, and we make sure we won't miss it if it's in the chat. So that's one note. We are streaming live on YouTube, so share it with your friends if they didn't get the RSVP in on time. I will just do an introduction about Gutman, kick it over to the president to share some about the event itself, go back to bios. I'll do the bios, and then we'll kick off the actual event. So let's get it started. So as many of you know, I assume that Gutman is the newest two-year college established in CUNY. We're a designated Hispanic serving institution and minority serving institution, with a lot of our students, a great number of our students being first generation and coming from all 5 boroughs and a few cities beyond NYC. So its inaugural class started in 2012. So we're hitting a 10-year anniversary this year. And since then, the faculty and staff have truly been committed to fostering deeply academically rigorous curriculum and equitable ecosystem here at the college. With that, we've gained a stellar reputation. We've been featured in peer-reviewed journals and presentations all over the country for our impressive graduation rates of 40% and higher. That surpasses that of local and national two-year community colleges. And we have completion rates between 14 and 20%. So as a result of all the student success, the college has received numerous honors, including recognition by niche.com, which I assume many of you have also seen, calling us the best community college in New York City back in 2020, and they recognize us often. So we take a lot of pride in that recognition and all the others that we get, and we look forward to gaining more in the state, nationally, and maybe even globally as we embark on the next decade of our work. So President Johnson, if you want to get started on sharing what the speaker series is, that would be helpful, and I'll jump back in and share bios.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Carlos. And I'm so happy to be here with these two great gentlemen, Olad and George. Thank you, brothers, for being here. Before we actually begin the program, though, I do know that our hearts, many hearts are heavy. Many students and family members may be being impacted by what's happening in Ukraine. So my hearts and my prayers go out to all of the communities that are currently impacted. I did want to make sure that we acknowledge that this is a difficult time for everyone. So as I thought about the theme, it is so apropos to what's happening in our nation: strength, courage, and resilience. And really the speaker series is an opportunity to introduce our students, our faculty, and our staff to some of the most influential leaders that are in the community, but not only just influential in the community, but leaders who really advocate for social justice and equity for all persons, for our students, and that have a heart for youth and have a heart for empowering the next generation. So in creating this opportunity, it is amplifying the roles that they play in the community, but also allowing our students, most importantly, to see themselves in many of the speakers that we will be introducing over the tenure of this program. We've had some dynamic speakers in the fall term, and we certainly have some today, and we'll have some in the future. So our students that are participating, please ask questions. There's a Q&A for you. There is a link that you can click on if you have a question, and I will monitor that to try and get some of those questions answered as we go throughout the conversation today. But just excited to be here, excited about the work that's taking place, and definitely honored that Olad and George have accepted the invitation to participate in the inaugural President Speaker Series.
And I'll just take that as the passing the baton to introduce these two brothers. So George Suttles is the Director of Research at the Common Fund Institute, supporting Common Fund's market research and professional development activities. Previously, he served as a program officer at the John A. Hartford Foundation, a private foundation that's focused on improving care for older adults, and also as Vice President, Senior Philanthropic Relationship Manager at U.S. Trust Bank of America. He's currently a member of numerous nonprofit boards, including the Odyssey House and the Support Center for Nonprofit Management. He received a bachelor's degree from Wesleyan University, a master's degree in philanthropic studies from the Lilly Family School of Philanthropy, and a master's degree from Baruch CUNY School of Public Affairs. So we've got a CUNY alum. Always nice to have that. So that's George Suttles. Appreciate you being here. And we have Olad to my left. I'm not sure where he's at on y'all screens. Olad Aden is an African German American street social worker, photographer, and videographer, currently based in Berlin, Germany. So it's late over there right now, I bet. And in this capacity, he has initiated and facilitated a number of youth exchange programs like the Bronx Berlin Exchange, which we've had circulate around the Gutman space. Together with a group of social workers and teaching artists, he has been conducting the project Zwischen Welten in the youth detention facility Berlin, youth detention facility Berlin for the last 5 years. So in addition, he's co-curated a number of cultural projects. In 2010, he co-curated Translating Hip Hop, which took place in Bogota, Beirut, Nairobi, and Berlin for the House of World Cultures in Berlin. He co-initiated and co-curated Spoken Worlds, a literature rap project between Berlin and Nairobi for the Literature Worksat Berlin, a project called DEXZA, a poetry rap music performance exchange program between Johannesburg and Berlin, funded by the Heinrich Böll Foundation and the Goethe Institute, and the German consulate in South Africa. Together with an amazing group of artists, he curated and organized and presented the project Detroit in Detroit and Berlin. He currently works on a full-length documentary about the Berlin-based street outreach project Gangway, which celebrates its 30th year anniversary this year. His photography was recently featured in the exhibition Counter Narratives in Berlin. The film The Bronx Berlin Connection he shot in New York City in 2018, together with Paris-based filmmaker Alcee Ndiaye, was nominated to several film festivals in 2020. It won the Hip Hop Film Festival in Rome, was selected to the Black International Film Festival in Montreal, the Angeles Docs Festival, and it was screened in Berlin and NYC. So we've got two worldly brothers here, and I will disappear to the back and enjoy the show myself. Thank you both.
Right. Thank you so much, Carlos. So as you can hear and see, we have two exceptional gentlemen who are doing so much good work and making an impact. And oftentimes, as we think about our Black and brown men, I remember many, many years ago, there was literature that talked about, the making of prison systems, if you will, and they looked at, the young age and a young third grade reading level to determine, the number of prisons that will be created. And I'm happy to have brothers here who can help us dispel those myths and encourage our young men of color and all of our genders, but might I add, to make sure that they can seek to do great work and they can make a difference in their community so that we can continue to build upon the great success of the shoulders who we stand on. So as I think about today, and I think about our theme, strength, courage, and resilience, each of these gentlemen have had to demonstrate strength in some type of way. And strength comes with various countless definitions. So when you think of your strength, George, and then Olad, when you think about your own strength, how do you define it, and how have you gained and sustained strength throughout your life, and particularly in the pandemic that we're in?
Yeah, no, thanks for that question, and thanks for having us and setting this up. This is fantastic. Happy to be here with all of you. It's interesting. We had an opportunity to connect and reflect around these questions, and I think the fact of the matter is that when I think about where I currently draw strength, courage, and resiliency from, for better or worse, it really does come from a combination of like fear, love, and ambition. Like, I'm afraid to fail. I'm afraid to let my elders and ancestors down. I'm afraid that if I fall behind, then whatever status I've achieved in the world won't be able to protect me from, the threats that are out there, impacting Black and brown men, boys, and communities across not only the city, but across the country. But then I also have an ambition and a hunger to do more and achieve more. And so, and then I have a love and a passion for the work that I do. But and I don't want to let my mama down, to be honest, with y'all and with the crowd, my mama, sacrificed a lot, and I don't want to let her down. So it's the fear of getting caught up. It's the fear of letting my loved ones down. It's the fear it's the fear that maybe my achievements won't protect me from what's out there, right? That if I'm out in the world as a Black man, no matter what I've achieved, that still doesn't protect me. But, but I believe that it might, right? So maybe status as shield is something that I'm afraid of losing. But I mention all of that to say that I've sort of like reached like an inflection point in my life where I don't want that to be my fuel for my strength, courage, and resiliency. I want imagination and creativity and hope and love to be what's the sort of underpinning of sort of how I'm moving in the world and what I'm seeking to do and be. So I just wanted to lift that up, is that, when I think about sustainability, I firmly believe that hope, love, creativity, and imagination are more sustainable ways for us to be and live and exist in the world and interrelate to each other than fear, ambition, trauma. Those are the things that, partially fuel me now, but I'm really, at this inflection point where I'm trying to sort of, find new fuel, find a new underpinning. And so, that's been a part of my journey. So I'm just really excited to sort of be doing that and try to figure all of that stuff out. So thanks for that question.
No, that's awesome. So what about you, Olad?
Yeah, I mean, I can totally relate to everything George just said. I mean, basically, I draw a lot of strength and a lot of resilience from the work that I do, and it's because, and I burn for what I do, but just because of the young people that I'm working with, you know what I mean? I work with young people, I do workshops in prison, I work with young refugees who have seen things I can't even imagine. I can't even understand it. Like, they tell me things that I don't know what that must be like, to go into a boat not knowing if you're going to ever see land again, the devastation and all of those things. So but when we do these projects, we work on something together. We have a common mission, and I get a lot out of it. So I put a lot into it, but I also get a lot out of it. So I work with a great team. I got great people surrounding me. I'm working with amazingly talented young people who have a lot to give, and basically it's all about just making it possible, just creating sort of a setting, you know what I mean, like where everybody can be creative. I mean, those are things that everybody draws on, creativity. And in a world where young people are always told you're not good enough to do this, you're not good enough in school, you're not good enough, at home or whatever. And then they have this one thing that they're passionate about, and the things that you can achieve just by connecting through those, those mediums and those art forms, it's amazing. I mean, and so I learn every day. I learn just as much as I teach. I also learn, and it just gives me a reason to get up every morning. So that's where I draw strength from.
I love that. And I thought about something. About a week ago, I participated on a panel, provided information about the imposter syndrome. And as I think about this topic today and the imposter syndrome of that, I'm not supposed to be here, the accomplishments that, that I have, garnered through, various means, is it truly real? Am I truly being my authentic self? And there's so many other, I would say, emotions that are elicited oftentimes when you think about the imposter syndrome. So the question that was posed to me during that time is, how do you rise above that? So you both have done great work. You're both committed to your communities. When you, as men of color, think about imposter syndrome, have you ever faced it, and how did you overcome, or how are you overcoming that? Because I think that we still, we get into different roles, and we have a certain level of experience and success, but there's still oftentimes maybe those feelings that come. So I want to jump back to George to get his response, and then go back to Olad.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. I mean, I definitely think imposter syndrome is real. And that sort of, I alluded to that in my previous comments. Like, I don't want to be existing in a professional or creative world anymore where I've got to contend with that. I want to be able to walk in. I want us to all be in spaces where we feel like our whole selves are being represented or being absorbed, and we're internalizing different kinds of messages. We're definitely not there yet, but, I think for me, that's part of my, when I think about like fuel for strength and resiliency, for better or worse, like constantly trying to overcome that imposter syndrome, getting that other degree and that certificate and working twice as hard, that's part of it, right? Is that, oh, maybe I will achieve so much that imposter syndrome will be impossible to permeate and get, and seep into my psyche around how I see myself, not only as a person, but a professional as well. So, that psychological phenomenon of imposter syndrome is real, but it's just that, it's an internalization of messages that are being projected on us. And as soon as we understand that, we can begin to sort of fight the fight around imposter syndrome in more productive ways. It's not about achieving more and being more. You already belong. You're already whole. Now it's just a matter of us sort of unraveling the internal, like the external narratives that we're internalizing from other people. We are enough. We've done enough. We have more than enough to contribute. We are whole persons with a lot to give. And so imposter syndrome is, pardon my French, is BS. And so how do we fight the fight, to basically to reprogram ourselves to understand that for ourselves? So.
Love that. Thank you. Olad, what do you think?
That's a great question. I mean, it's especially relevant for me because sometimes, every day I have moments where I don't really know what I'm doing. You know what I mean? I don't even know how I ended up where I'm at. It's all like, sometimes I wake up and I'm like, it's all some kind of big mistake or maybe a dream or something. I made a lot of mistakes as a young person. You know what I mean? I made a lot of mistakes, and that's maybe what connects me to the young people that I'm working with today, because I know for a fact it's never too late for anyone to learn anything, for changing your ways, no matter what you've done. I think what helps me is that I measure success not by something that I accomplish or by something that is in my credit or online or something. It's more the success. I see it in the young people that I'm working with. So when I take young people to New York City, or when I take New York kids from communities who've never been to Europe, who've never even left their state or maybe even their city, and I see them changing in front of my very eyes, I know that what I'm doing all makes sense to me. So I don't really have that doubt, because I have that in front of me and I see it every single day, and I know what it can do. And so I don't really doubt what I'm doing. Sometimes I doubt that I'm the right person. You know what I mean? Like, or whether you know what I mean? It's I don't know. It's a difficult question, and I think we're all dealing with that. But I think I'm lucky enough to have experiences every day that show me that it all somehow makes sense.
And I love it, and I think that goes into a great segue into this question about the work that you've done with the Bronx-Berlin connection. And really talking more about that. Tell us that story.
Well, I came to Berlin in the end of 2003, and I started working in Berlin in 2004. And I never had worked with predominantly Muslim kids of like North African descent, Turkish, and so forth. And it was all kind of new to me. And at first, I mean, this was under Bush, we had the Iraq war was going on. And I kind of figured, okay, this is going to be difficult. Like right now, it's difficult to be an American overseas. And what I quickly found out is that the kids that I was dealing with, I mean, they would just reduce me to hip hop. You know what I mean? It's like, I'm all about, they got 16-year-old Palestinian kids who want to discuss whether Biggie or Tupac was better. But the thing that kind of shocked me the most is that a lot of people just reduce African-American culture to just that, you know what I mean? To what they hear on the radio, to misogyny. Literally, they'll say that. It's like, I want to be like the dudes in the, in the movie, I want to have a gun and it's cool. And then we kind of like, okay, what are you going to do with this? Obviously, this is something that you can work with, because there's a big fascination. And so we set up these creative writing programs, we produced music, and we said everybody can be on this album, but and we didn't censor anybody. We just said whatever you talk about has to be an actual part of your life. So it's about creative writing, about being creative, learning how to write rhymes with a deeper meaning in a sense. And then we said, okay, we had all these young kids fresh out of prison, and we said, okay, you know what? We'll just go to New York. That's the birthplace of hip hop. It's the mecca of hip hop. We'll just go once. The idea was to go once, and we'd never stopped since. We've been going back and forth for 13 years. We had kids or young students from Gutman in Berlin. We had young students from CUNY Prep in the South Bronx over here. We had kids from the Door who was supposed to come through a couple of years ago. And it's been an amazing experience to me. I mean, the first time we did it, we just kind of like, how should I say this? We didn't really know what we were doing, you know what I mean? Because I took a bunch of kids who were kind of like, rough a little. And then, when you're 4 hours into the flight, you think I can get some work done on my computer, and you're in the plane and you're thinking, is there somebody smoking in here right now? And then they almost landed us in Iceland, and it was but everybody that's been part of the program has changed, and it's been a learning experience. And it's about, and on my end, the work that I do is to get young people to reconsider school, reconsider education, reconsider employment, and changing their ways. And you connect through these type of things. So yes.
I love that. And George, you are a part of a major work that's happening. There was an short interview of you that the Odyssey House created, and you've been on their board now since 2013. And the Odyssey House, for our audience, it helps people overcome drug addiction and alcohol abuse. And in that interview, you talked about how important it is to remain connected to your community. So I see you and Olad remaining connected to your community and the work that you do. So what advice would you give people who want to find ways to be connected in their own hometowns? And you could share any additional information you would like to about the Odyssey House project.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. Yeah, first and foremost, Odyssey House as an organization is really, really important to me because a majority of their work is in Harlem in the Bronx. And so I'm a New York City native. I'm born and raised in Harlem. And so it's really, really important that I support the work that they're doing because, if you know anything about Harlem in the 80s, with the crack epidemic, heroin, it not only impacted my neighbors and my broader community, but I had family members who, grappled with addiction. And so when I got to a point in my professional career where I was able to serve on a nonprofit board, Odyssey House's mission really resonated with me. And I wanted to be a part of an organization that was connected to a community I still lived in, that my mom still lived in, that my cousins still live in. So, I'm able to say that this organization that I donate to, that I serve as a leader, really is providing the services that I know our folks need access to. I know Harlem and the Bronx, Harlem has changed, through gentrification, and the Bronx is, going through its own transformation, but we still have people who are struggling and grappling with addiction. And so, my ability to be a part of Odyssey House's mission is incredibly important, and it keeps me connected to a community that I really, really care about. Now, nonprofit board service might not end up being for everyone. And there are a myriad of ways to stay connected to community. So I would just encourage that, never forget where you're from, never forget what, the trials and tribulations you had to face in the communities that you grew up in. And so whether it's through, public service, volunteerism, maybe participating in local government, working for or volunteering, in a nonprofit that serves your community, or just reaching back and providing a young person an opportunity, a job opportunity or an opportunity for an education, or just through mentorship, going back to where you're from, and educating people about the opportunities you've accessed that are out, that could potentially be out there for them. So many ways to give back. Just don't forget to reach back. Don't forget to tell people where you, and to sort of Olad's point, don't forget to chronicle your journey and tell your story to the community that you're from, because your story could be an inspiration for somebody else saying, hey, I'm struggling here. There's no way for me to get out. Times are tough here. It's like, no. There's a pathway. There's an opportunity. Be a beacon of hope for somebody. So myriad of ways to give back. Odyssey House and board service is just one way that I have found incredibly fruitful and helpful, but just so many ways to give back. So just don't forget to go back, to be in community with folks where you grew up, and to tell your story. I think that's one, that's something we all can do. So.
Absolutely. The power of this storytelling. I mean, we know that from antiquity, that is how recipes and oral traditions, we still have oral traditions today that we're continuing to learn from, and keeping those memories of our ancestors alive. So that is critically important around the oral history and telling that story that can impact so many people who've had similar struggles and similar backgrounds, but certainly the impetus to their success. So I want to remain here with you, George, and talk a little bit more about your role with the Common Fund, the Common Fund Institute. So we know that you're a CUNY grad, which again, congratulations. We always love seeing CUNY grads. But I think about the term resilience, such an important word when we think about resilience, and that can mean something to the audience depending upon the experiences they've had in life. But when you think about resilience and you think about your trajectory and the work that you've done, does that word resonate with you? And if so, how?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. I mean, I think, throughout my entire career, if you were sort of like map out my resume, I've always tried to do work at an intersection of my passion and interests and like my ability to help people and give back. So even in my role at the Common Fund Institute, we're working with nonprofits as institutional investors. So helping nonprofits with endowments and other pools of assets, try to figure out how do we help them grow those assets so that they can fuel their mission, scholarships, grants, and other programmatic initiatives that are being funded by money that we're helping them invest. And so, there's no greater snapshot of resiliency than the last 2 years. I mean, all of our teams at Common Fund, especially mine, going virtual, and pre-COVID, a lot of our work was done in person. We were able to flex our muscles by convening very important people to have important conversations about things that mattered to nonprofit institutional investors. And now we're on Zoom. And now we can't influence individuals like we could when we could fly to them and have, one-on-one conversations with them. Oh, by the way, all of my staff are grappling with COVID, with fears around COVID, taking care of family members, they're getting sick. And so how do I make sure that I hold space for people to take care of themselves, but also ensure them that, they've got some level of job security and that we have the capability as a team to continue to be productive in the midst of a global pandemic. And then, oh, by the way, summer of 2020, we face a racial reckoning that, some could argue were bubbling up for decades. And it's like, oh, people of color at Common Fund and on my team are hurting and struggling. Heck, I'm struggling, I'm hurting. I don't want to do work anymore. I want to hit the streets. I want to protest. I want to make sure that what happened to George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor never happens again. And so the work that we're doing at Common Fund seems trivial compared to everything else that's going out in the world. And so, just trying to stay compassionate, empathetic, and productive were sort of the three main tenets of not only how I led my team, but how I tried to show up. I was like, maybe today we don't got it. Maybe I said, hey team, we don't got it today. We don't got it today. I can see it in your Zoom, in the Zoom boxes. I can see it. Folks are tired. They're hurting. They're not feeling well. Let's regroup when we feel like we can do work that we care about, that's important to the field and to our constituents, in the best way possible. Let's try to show up best we can. And if we can't do that, let's rest. So, I'd say compassion, empathy, and productivity were the three main things I tried to focus on, because triangulating those three things allowed my team and myself to show up in ways that, allowed us not only to be productive, but to receive internal and external accolades from our industry. So, that's what I try to stay focused on. And even as we sort of move into, a next phase of what this pandemic's going to look like, I'm still holding to those tenets. Let's reimagine the way we work together as a team, and we show up and, and define productivity for ourselves. So
you spoke volumes there. I mean, that'll preach. And I'm from the South, everyone, so forgive me. That'll preach all by itself. I just have to say that. So Olad, you work with the youth in Berlin, and for the most part, you have access to youth in New York City. So you're still keeping your roots grounded there. Tell us about the experiences or the ways you experience resilience in the students that you work with.
Yeah, it is amazing, I mean, and I want to say it's different, but then at the same time, it's a lot of the same. You know what I mean? You have a lot of young people from impoverished families who live in small apartments with a lot of siblings. They don't have their own space. They don't have their own, you know what I mean, their own little room for themselves. So a lot of them just hang out on the street. You know what I mean? And they hang out in these groups, and these groups become their family. And so. It is tremendously important to them as individuals, and at the same time, so we as social workers, we try to work with the group as a whole. So a lot of people like to split these groups up, especially if they're being problematic in the community. If they steal and do things like that, then the police and everybody would like to split them up. We don't try to do that. We try to work with the entire group and to connect with them on a trust level, build relationships and so forth, and then try to get them to reflect on some of the things that they've done. And so a lot of that is just very, it could be just everyday, just conversations, you know what I mean? Because a lot of the kids that we're dealing with, I'll give you an example. We have a group of kids who may have beaten somebody up, like a bus driver or something, right? And then after that, they even run around and brag about it, and you can honestly tell that they've never really reflected on what they've done, because nothing is cool about beating up an older person with 5 guys, you know what I mean? So just by creating these settings where you can have a conversation and be like, what did he look like? And did he bleed? Did he cry? What happened? And you can see that the entire thing crumbles down as they go back to what actually occurred and reflect on it. And then you can start the process of coming together, of like maybe reflecting and then maybe making different choices in the future. I mean, because a lot of them, these are extreme cases that I'm talking about right now, but a lot of them, everything has already failed. They already flunked out of school. They've already been to prison. That didn't work. So authority and a lot of those things obviously didn't work. So we have some very good experiences by coming at them from a different angle. And so that's part of what we do, but it's a big part of our everyday work.
Love that. So I do want to remind everyone that you are able to pose questions in the chat. If you have a question that you would like to ask of Olad or George, please ask those questions there. We are monitoring the chat, and we will do our best to provide those questions and responses to you. So I want to stay there, Olad, and I think about the projects that you've done with the Bronx-Berlin connection, and for almost a decade now, and you're finally beginning to see the recognition at film festivals for all of the work around the world. So when you think about this notion of resilience, your commitment to these projects, and the people that you have connected with all of the years, how do you see resilience in the work, and now that it's being recognized globally?
Yeah, I mean, it's nice, it's nice, especially to get the recognition through the movie, and because a lot of times, you try to explain what it is, what you do, and it is kind of difficult to grapple for some folks, because you don't really, it's just a youth exchange, or it's just a bunch of young people coming together, but it's so much more than that, you know what I mean? Because in this case, this is a program that kind of focuses on young people who don't have these opportunities, you know what I mean? Like, so if you're doing well academically and so forth, you have your little opportunities. You can travel abroad, you can do learning abroad, you can do, a semester somewhere else. But what I'm interested in is working with kids who may not even be there yet. They might not even think about school at this point. They might be right there at a point where they're like, okay, I can go in this direction or I can go in that direction. And I think if you come at the right moment, I think you can do some tremendous you can do a tremendous difference. We're doing a project in Southwest Detroit right now. We're leaving on April 29th, and we're going to be there with a bunch of young people. We've created an album on Zoom with these kids. They've never left Detroit, and they are slated to be here May 22nd. We're doing concerts all over Berlin, at the Trésor, which is a big club over here in Berlin, and then they travel on to London and Paris. So this will be a mind-blowing experience to some of these young people, and they will come back different. They will come back different, because once you've done that, you're like, okay, what's next? I'm ready to go to, I don't know, Brazil, or what the world is all of a sudden a lot smaller, and so much more is possible. You know what I mean? Just by having that experience. So ultimately, what keeps me going is it is difficult to make this happen every year because you always have to you have to get the money at the end of the day. So I'm tremendously, it's great. The U.S. Embassy is always supporting us a little bit here in Berlin, the Goethe Institute in New York, the German consulate in New York, and so forth. It's great. What I'd love is to get to the point where we can get sustainable funding on both ends, where you have people who believe in the mission. Because right now the whole thing is very dependent on me as a person. But what if I'm not going to be around for some reason in 5 years? Then the whole thing is just going to end. And I'd like to get to a point where this can exist for the next 20, 30, 40, heck, 50 years, and give a lot more people an opportunity to travel back and forth and have these types of experiences. So yeah, but it's great to get the recognition, but in terms of the funding, we're not even nearly there yet.
No, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. So we've heard great feedback from Olad and George around this notion of courage, resilience. And when I think about the role of the community college, I mean, that speaks volumes to me, because our role is to provide access to our students who are oftentimes from marginalized communities, underserved communities, underrepresented communities. And the work that you're doing has a direct correlation to ensuring that those students are able to be successful. And that is one of the reasons why you were so selected to be part of this conversation, because you understand the population. A couple of things you talked about that resonate with me is empathy. Empathy during a time where, it's just okay. I love what George said. It is okay to show up, and you're looking at these Zoom boxes and you can see that people are they're tired. And it's okay for the leader to say, well, let's take a few minutes and let's talk about the feelings and the emotions and the experiences that you're having as a result of these external factors. So I love that, leading from a place of empathy is so critically important. So there is a question here that we have from our audience, from President John Sigilski. He said, Olad, from what you have learned in working with you, what do they need from us today in higher education, especially community colleges?
Yeah, that's I'm in Germany, so you don't have community colleges where I'm at. I wish we did. I wish. I mean, it's difficult because in Germany, you have to know very early on in life where you want to go. You know what I mean? Like what you want to do with your life. You have to make these I have a 16-year-old daughter who right now has to make a choice whether she continues on with her education or to start like some type of job training program or something. So it's not that, in the States, it's not unusual that you go back to community college to change your career. You know what I mean? And it's over here, it's not that way. So here you have the German school system, which if you want to go to college, you have to do what's called Abitur. So regular high school is 10 years. And then you want to go to college, you have to do an additional 2 years. Problem is, once you dropped out of school, it's very, very difficult to get that additional 2 years in, because it's difficult. And then they'll go on to college. So for a lot of the young people that I'm working with, they're like, well, I want to be a social worker. At 25, I want to be a social worker, but I didn't finish school, so they don't even try. They give up on that idea. That, you know what I mean. So what we done is we created we created a project called the Street College through Gangway, which is focused on young school dropouts who can work with some of these educators there and social workers to obtain their what you would call a GED in the US. And then you can use that and then go on and find alternative ways to get your education. So in order to be a social worker, you would have to go the long route. Now you would have to do what's called social assistant, which is a 2-year program. Then you can do another 3-year program to be an ATSIA, which is not quite a social worker. And then you have to do an additional 2 years. And then so it's a very long way. It's possible, but it's they need a lot of encouragement. And obviously the way is not that easy academically as well. So it's it's difficult. And so I think if we had a system that would be that you could compare to like a Gutman or a good community college, that would be gold.
Awesome. Oh, thank you for that question. And George, same to you.
Yeah, sure. I mean, we talked a little bit about this, in preparation for this conversation. I mean, the importance of, community colleges, especially the work that Gutman's doing. I think first and foremost, if I'm just like thinking about it off the top of my head, is like, community colleges need to provide young people opportunity, right? And not just a finite amount of opportunities, but just as many opportunities as possible. There has to be, community colleges have to hold space for exploration, and counseling around not only opportunities, but the right opportunities for students. 2, I think, community colleges need to provide young people networks. A lot of community college students are first generation immigrants, come from marginalized communities. And so they lack the networks to be able to pursue their professional ambitions or their creative ambitions in a way that other young people have access to networks, right? It's like, oh, hey, I might have not been the best student, but my father's a doctor, my uncle, is a hospital administrator, my mother is an attorney. And so even if I'm not the best student, I still have a network of family and friends and a broader network to tap into to get access to opportunities. And so for those of us who were the first in our families to go to college or, are new to this country and are just trying to find our way, we don't have those networks. And so the community colleges can provide, if community colleges can provide those networks, then the opportunities will come. So I think that's part of it. Also is, a nurturing space. A lot of community college students or just first generation immigrant students or students from marginalized communities need additional help and support outside of the classroom. And so what does it look like to say, hey, how do we take care of you, not just as a student, but as a whole person, so that we can allow you to focus on the things that you need to focus on in the classroom and beyond that. So, right. So I think that nurturance is something that community colleges can support students with. And then also just, do the math, like the value, right? Community colleges need to be offering young people value, because if I'm a first generation student and I'm low income and I'm paying X, I'm still paying something. And so what's the commensurate value that community colleges are offering young people for the money that they're paying? And so, Gutman doesn't have that problem, because I think you're tremendously high value, but that's something that we all need to be keeping front of mind, is that, are we providing value for young people as a community college ecosystem? And so those would be the things off the top of my head that I would think about. I think Gutman is first in class in doing that, but when I speak to other community college leaders, those are sort of the 4 things that come up for me. So that's what I would offer.
No, that's great. And you're in a position, as it relates to funding, to have those conversations with leaders to say, what is the value? What is that value proposition? So guys, this has been great. I know that we are closing in on time. We would love to take another question. Do have any there? I know that there are students that are in the audience. So if there's a burning question that our students may have, please type it in the box here. But if not, certainly it has been a pleasure to talk to Olad and George. Thank you for all of the great work that you're doing in New York and abroad to make sure that our students have access. That is so critically important that they have access. You talk about nurturing. You talk about all of the things that we know that are the prerequisites, if you will, to ensure that a student is successful. So I do see that there is a question here. And the question is, do you think that men of color are placed in the position of constantly seeking validation with the hope that it will help us to believe that we are really good enough? Who wants to take that first? Do we think that men of color are placed in the position of seeking validation with the hope that it will help us to believe that we are really good enough? That's a good question.
That's a deep one. That's one I'm gonna have to take to therapy later this week. I don't have an answer per se, but I can reflect on it, you know, if that's helpful at all. And I think I alluded to it earlier. I don't want to be, I don't want to, for me, as a Black man in this country and as a professional who has tried to achieve, you know, as much as I can, I don't want to, how do I do the work within myself to mitigate the need for outside validation, right? And so that is like straight up mastery of self, tending to my mental wellness, filling my spiritual, you know, reservoir so that I can generate my own joy. I can generate my own validation without having to seek it externally. So that's the work that I'm doing right now and that I encourage others to do. I wish somebody would have told my 18, 19, 20-year-old self that, like, hey, brother, like you've got to focus on mastery of self. You've got to focus on self-love, because all the success in the world is not going to validate you in the way that you're going to be able to validate yourself when you look in the mirror. So the answer is yes, we are bombarded with, you know, external voices that tell us that we're less than, that what we're doing isn't enough. But we need to focus on doing the work within ourselves, and then also bigging each other up. So that's why I really appreciate the space, because I'll say, Dr. Johnson, you're that guy. You are doing it. You belong here, brother. You belong in this leadership seat, you know, and we'll do everything that we can to support your leadership because you belong here and we want to follow you. Olad, my brother, you are crushing it. Congratulations on the film and all the work that you're doing. Phenomenal, exceptional work. I love the work that you're doing, and I'm going to email you and I'm going to follow up with you and see if I can help you on the funding side. So that's the work we have to do. We have to love ourselves and we have to love each other, because we're phenomenal. We're a phenomenal community. We're a phenomenal village. And if we don't celebrate each other and celebrate ourselves, nobody else will. So.
Olad, did you have
Thanks, man. I'm deeply impressed by everything I read about you as well. So I give that right back to you. And in terms of like, it's a very, very deep question, and I'm probably going to think about this one for a few days. I try not to think in terms like that anymore, because every day you have situations where you're kind of like, in a sense, have to validate yourself through. If I go to immigration with I was recently at an immigration office with a young person that I'm working with, and he's from Lebanon, and he was supposed to go to New York. So we're trying to get his paperwork straight and so forth. And the lady is just straight up disrespecting me because she's just thinking I don't know what she's thinking. So, you know, I asked her, and in Germany, a lot of it comes through title, through that sort of thing, you know what I mean? And you have to sort of prove yourself, you know, you have to prove that you speak fluent German, otherwise you don't, you know, so you get a lot of disrespect as a person of color, especially. And so we're sitting there and I'm trying to get this information to get this paperwork situation corrected. And the lady is just like totally like not giving it to me. And she's, in Germany, you have a formal and informal way of approaching somebody. So she's just like saying, do, like, you know, those kinds of things. And then when I take out my ID and I'm like, look, I'm a social worker and I need you to give me this information, all of a sudden it's different. You know, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize that, you know. And so now she's like very nice and just giving me, so, and it's like, so a lot of it's these everyday sort of situations where you're being disrespected, where you're like, it's difficult. So in a certain sense, you have to validate yourself every single day. But I try not to get angered and frustrated by it because it happens all the time.
Good feedback, and certainly, personally, definitely reflections that I have daily, coming to campus. You wonder about that, and it's for me, to George's point, it's really not seeking validation once you know who you are and what your purpose is. And I think once we figure out what our purpose is, oftentimes, and George pointed this out, because we have not seen those examples, we're going throughout life and we're trying to navigate, trying to figure it out, then we have these moments of ambiguity because we have not had those examples. And someone mentioned it earlier, having people who are in our kitchen sink or cabinet, if you will, whatever the meaning that you would like to kind of put to that, but having mentors and people who are doing exactly what it is that you want to do, who can constantly metaphorically pour into you, say, hey, you're great, you're going to be wonderful, here's some additional steps to getting here, or here's some resources. I think that helps to really cause us as men of color to really think deeply about, okay, I'm meant to be here at this place and time, and we have to make sure that we don't allow the thoughts that come to us and those projections to cause us to not be at the table so that we can influence outcomes for people that we know who look like us, who are marginalized, who are underrepresented, because sometimes that is the design at times. We have to be honest about that. Sometimes we are meant to be distracted, or the attempt is to distract so that we are not at the table, so that we're not voicing, our concerns for these communities. And I think that for the person that asked the question is to continually to laser focus on what your goal is about helping people, and how do you see yourself doing that, and who do you need to align yourself with in order to be able to achieve those outcomes. And that's what I would say to that response as well. But great opportunity to speak to you, Olad and George. I believe that there's a more conversation that we will do in the future. I can't wait to have you on campus at some point in time to meet many of our students and everyone that stayed with us. Thank you so much for attending the spring edition of the President Speaker Series. We have a great group of dynamic women who will be joining me on next month as we talk about this very same topic, but from the powerful women in the City University of New York. So have a great day, everyone. Take care, and we look forward to seeing you at another time. And there's still an opportunity for registration. So tell students to register, www.gutman.cuny.edu. And I'm sure some of our great registration, our admissions and recruitment team will get back to you. So everyone have a great day, and thank you so much for attending.